Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Tuesday. It is Song and Beyond here on IDAGIO Live, the place where classical music happens. A co-production with the Hampson Foundation, and yours truly is back. I'm live. I'm back home. I'm in my library. I'm in an incredibly good mood. It was very warm today. And tonight's program is a continuation of our celebration of women's creativity that we've been doing, like everyone else in the world, in the month of March, but a little bit of a different twist. Another project that is about women's creativity from someone who has nothing to do with song, as in word song, but sings with the violin like you can't believe. It is my great pleasure. And that's the other thing about these series that I really like. I'm not sure when Laura Colgate and I would have ever met or crossed paths, but because of this new digital community that we really are expanding in classical music, and that is certainly thanks to IDAGIO Live and idagio.com as a streaming platform, I've had such a pleasure to meet and speak with and get to know a lot of colleagues that I probably wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. And tonight is another one. I get to meet and speak with the wonderful Laura Colgate. Welcome. Great to meet you. Well, let's get started.
Thank you, Thomas. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Going right to the. I'm just checking my windows here, getting all my technological prowess at will. Laura, there's so much to talk about the Boulanger project. There's so much to talk about your various services in various orchestras, and the reason I'm stumbling is because when I was reading up on you and going through your website, and I'll do a little screen showing later and show you, ladies and gentlemen, beautiful websites, but I don't know, what I loved was all of these things you are doing, concert mistress here, concert master there, project here, educational project, and then at the end, there's this one sentence that says, and has a small studio in Maryland. And I thought, right, and she washes cars on the weekend, and she takes, children for a walk in the parks, and she's a dog walker. I mean, you're incredibly busy. Has it just grown organically to this level of busyness, or are you aware of how many hats you're carrying all the time?
I think I've always been this busy, but the pandemic has had quite a big hand in the type of busy and how that's changed, because usually I'm just on the road constantly and playing and traveling and playing concerts
Right.
and all this. And of course, for all of us, it stopped immediately. And I just
Well, the singing world certainly got stopped, and I know the concert world in general, but I keep hearing about this and that concert and some chamber concerts and so forth. Did you lose 90%, 80%, 70%, 100%? How much of your calendar in the last 12 months? I cannot believe, parenthetically, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say this. We are March 30. I don't remember when my first interview was, or the first Tuesday. I think we started with Tuesday first, but maybe Thursday. I don't know. But I know that was the end of March. So I've been doing this for 12 months. I love doing it. I love meeting with people and inviting friends. And on Tuesdays, talking about anything and everything you can possibly talk about with song and creativity. I just personally can't believe that we're still doing this 12 months later. I immediately thought we're not going to get through this before the fall, but I am astonished that the calendars just keep moving. And here in Europe, I'm in Zurich and just got back from Italy, and that sounds all wonderful and romantic, but we worked for 5 weeks as if we were going to go on stage, and then 6 performances of Così fan tutte were canceled. So it feels like in some ways a new normal, but we're still in a pandemic. So tell me what the last 12 months have been like.
Yeah, I think it's probably been around 80% has been canceled. But we've pivoted so that we're doing online concerts, and of course the programming is completely different, and we've never done production before for basically TV shows and all of this. So figuring out the production
Right.
side, building scripts, and it's not just having a concert. But I traveled. This was my first time traveling out of Maryland for the last year, and we just had our first performance for a live audience. I just played Four Seasons down with.
I was going to say that was the Four Seasons, right?
Yeah, Yeah, so this was my first time, and I can't even tell you how much different I feel.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to have a big effect on me, but to this extent, I mean, it's just
How big a public did you have?
400 people were
Wow.
allowed, and they're very socially distanced, and it's a hall of over 3,000 capacity. So there's still, a lot of socially distancing and all of that going on. Everybody's wearing masks and all of that. It's a lot of people to be in a room with after having been, isolated for a year. But it's just
You
so
know,
nice to be back on the.
I got to do a recital after the shutdown. The first thing I did publicly was recital in July, and you could feel. I mean, I exactly the same. I mean, you wanted to drop to your knees, and it was Mahler and American music and the whole thing. My stuff. And we are very very grateful. But you could. I don't want to be glib. I want to use a funny analogy. I hope nobody takes offense, but I was like singing to a bunch of drug addicts. I mean, everybody was just still as a mouse, mainstreaming every musical thought you could make audible, and it was incredible. And it was, of course, I've often sung in Zurich, so it was in the hometown kind of thing for me. But nevertheless. When people get concerned about post-COVID and will people go to performances and concerts, I think we have to be concerned about what dimensions will be in and new nows and new regulations. But I think people are incredibly hungry for live music. And again, the digital world that I'm so committed to and you are so committed to, and it's all important. And I think it's going to be, in some ways, we're going to be able to do it better. It's going to be that wonderful digital augmentation, even in the concert form, analog and digital. But there's nothing that replaces human-to-human music making and music sharing. And maybe that will have a new reverence. Maybe people realize that even buying a ticket is a proactive engagement to the musical moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think we all have a newfound respect for freedom in general, and to be able to communicate with other human beings, and to be able to choose when and how that happens, and to make that choice to buy that ticket and go to the concert hall and support the orchestra and hear the music live, and which pieces, right? Like thinking so much about how we
Unbelievable.
history and how we're doing it right now, and okay, am I going to choose Haydn, which I've heard a million times, or am I going to go hear a living composer and help support them and build a new history, and all of this kind of thing, and women composers with that.
I want to circle back and have you give us a live Wikipedia of you. But first, I want to close this thought, and that is that do you think we have a hope that the repertoire will inherently be wider, deeper, more fascinating, more indicative of the world we live in, other than just the program stuff of classical concerts?
What we have seen online the last 12 months, there are organizations, presenters, orchestras who have been playing repertoire that they would never have
Yeah,
presented on the
right.
stage. And we can only hope that that stays a part of the repertoire. I mean, once we start relying on those ticket sales again, who knows what's going to happen? I don't think the boards have had nearly as much of a hand in what are we playing on online right now, right? Like they do
Right.
when the artistic director says, "Well, this is what I want to present." They say, "We're not going to sell tickets to that." I don't think that algorithm has been thrown out the window for a
Yeah, I
lot of
think
audiences now, and they're gonna buy tickets to completely different shows and different repertoire now. So hopefully some of it sticks.
if I may just, I mean that was the passion behind the Global Concert Hall series inside of Adagio.com. Adagio.com, we were always talking, I've been with them from the beginning, and I'm passionate about the digital realm, and streaming is tomorrow and today, and it's all very exciting. And it's a huge, the Adagio.com has a huge classical catalog, and enormous numbers that are anchored in singular and unique recordings, and and Adagio Live, we'd always talked about video, but really it was the pandemic that threw us into, well, let's get artists online talking about what they're passionate about, either in a masterclass situation or my kind of a hybrid of interview presentation, depending on between the evening kind of thing. And then came the Global Concert Hall in June, which the idea that the mission is exactly what you've just described: get performances and public in the same space at the same time. And if that's a digital realm now, so be it. If it's a limited public, so be it. I compare it to sort of opening more doors and windows so that more people are participating in this moment. It's not a catalog. It's not a, Adagio doesn't produce. Adagio makes possible. It's a platform in which whoever is doing what they're doing can simply have a wider, deeper effect. And I think a lot of people not a lot of people, but some other organizations took a page out of that. I think that's where this momentum seems to be going. And in that, exactly what you said, different artists of age and color and cultures doing a vast myriad of repertoire. And I think there's a tipping point here. I don't think we're going to go back. I don't think the New York Phil will even want to simply sell a season on their new Tchaikovsky series with whatever. And I'm not being glib about either Tchaikovsky nor the miracle conductors that might do it, but I don't think that's what the bread and potatoes or whatever we call that is going to be. Is it? Do you think? I mean, you have such a maybe in answering that question, circle back and start from the beginning, where you grew up, how you started with the violin, but especially the schooling, because you reminded me that we actually crossed paths way back in the early. So you know how orchestras work. You know the inside of an orchestra intimately.
Yeah, well, so let me start with now and then
Thank you.
Jump back to the beginning. So now I'm concertmaster of the National Philharmonic at Strathmore, which is in Bethesda, Maryland. And I live in Maryland, right on the DC-Maryland border. So that's where I'm usually based. Right now I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina with my family. So
cool.
I just came back from Greenville. I'm also the concertmaster of the Greenville Symphony in South Carolina. So that sort of double life of running back.
Well, there's a bit of an axis there.
Yeah, I mean,
do you drive or fly or train?
In normal life, I fly because there's a quick hour and a half, less than an hour and a half direct flight that goes, from DC to Greenville. So it's door to door. It's really, really fast. Right now, not flying quite yet, but I drove down here so that I could come visit family because I had to meet my new niece.
Oh, I love it.
15 months old, and see my family. I drove this time. But so I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, which is where my parents still live, and ended up knowing from a very young age that I was going to be a violinist. I knew very, very early. I think I was 9 when I made that decision to become a professional violinist. And
I mean, I chuckle because when I was 9, all I wanted to do was play baseball and do as little as possible. But and all of this came much later. But I mean, seriously, we know that instrumentalists start earlier. That's fine. But is that typical of someone of your caliber, of a professional soloist and leader, that early recognition of I'm going to do this comes up so early?
I know a lot of musicians who started, string players. It's much more rare with, different instruments and all of that. But I know a lot of string players who are professional who started when they were 3, 4, 5 years old. And I mean, it's a second language. So the earlier you start speaking it, learning it, using it, the more.
So did Mom hand you the violin?
Mom was a pianist. My brother is exactly 4 years older, and so I was in the womb of my mother going to his lessons. So I heard every lesson from the beginning, and apparently I started singing. I started singing Twinkle, and all of we were brought up on Suzuki, which is a method, a teaching methodology. And I started singing all of his Suzuki songs before I ever said words. So it was actually my first language. I think English is probably my second my second language.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. So, you have an older brother. Are your parents musical?
My dad sings in the shower very well, but that's the extent. My mother was a pianist. She was the organist and choir director at our church growing up. She taught piano, and she was actually my music teacher in grade school growing up.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Fantastic. As a professional singer, I have to tell everybody, I don't sing in the shower. I stretch. I enjoy the warm water. I shave when I shave, but I don't. I'm not sure that I sing. I mean, sing. I mean, I'm sure I make. Never mind. Go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
for me, it goes to show, everybody in my family is passionate about music because my dad
Absolutely.
shower.
I love it. And so Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is probably known a little bit more for a different kind of music.
A different kind of music. We've got the blues and the jazz going on down there. I did grow up going to see the Memphis Symphony play and falling asleep during intermission because I was too young to stay up that late. And it was definitely a part of my upbringing, and my parents, instilled that in me on purpose from a very
There
young
was some guy named Elvis from down there, isn't he?
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Tupelo, Memphis, something like that. Yeah, Graceland is nonstop, still booming.
Did you go? Have you ever been to Graceland?
Of course I have. That's where you take people when they come and visit you in Memphis.
I've never been. I want to go. I mean, you kidding?
Yeah.
I went to Nashville, and I just bummed all over the city, going. But I have to confess, I am a closet country western music cousin fan, and in fact, I cannot recommend anyone and everyone more than Ken Burns' series on country western music. His series on jazz as well, but there's also a melding in that. I want to call him up and say, okay, you've done that. Now, can we layer in the classical music history and everything that's going on at the same time in all the various cultures as well? But we're gonna get to that. But it's so fascinating. It's so fantastic. Are you an Elvis fan? Do you like his voice?
Well, I love Elvis. When you grow up hearing it that much, as a teenage girl trying to rebel, I tried not to like Elvis. But that being said, once you actually, know music, there's no doubt that he was just absolutely brilliant. And
I mean, seriously incredible. So when you started the violin and when you were playing even as a young person, was your repertoire or your musical interest very eclectic, or were you really just totally fascinated on how beautiful can I make that Mozart sonata?
It was, I grew up on Suzuki, so the last three books are Mozart concerti. So other than that, we would go to towns and stuff, and I do remember playing some fiddle and bluegrass and things like that around here. But I was very much focused and classically trained, and I was determined from a very young age that was what I wanted to do.
Can you improv? Can you do improvisation?
I used to do a lot more non-classical improv when I was younger, and then I got my first master's at Guildhall School in London, and actually the minor that I focused on was classical improvisation. So it wasn't until I was much older that I started doing that, but I think there has to be a connection there, that because I grew up doing the bluegrass fiddle improv kind of thing, which I think a lot of classical musicians and classically trained musicians don't
do that. Right? So I mean, if you were some session, you were just hanging around or whatever, and some fiddler, well, forgive me, but like a deliverance man, da da dee da dee da dee da da, But I mean, if somebody just said, "Oh, have you ever heard this tune?" and went da 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 da, could you just kind of go off on that and play that? Have you got that kind of musical
It depends. It really depends. I don't. My brain doesn't understand the whole like
Yeah,
jazz side of things, so I
yeah.
cannot go off on that side of improv. But I, grew up surrounded by blues and all of that, so that's very much a natural language for me.
Well, this is fascinating to me. These are really my questions. Talking to a professional, wonderful fiddler, I mean, people ask me this as a singer as well. But when you're, for instance, blues or jazz, but let's go to blues, and somebody's playing the violin. I mean, the musical language is different. I get that, and everything about. But in fact, how they're doing what they do, is that the same world?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people first they ask, is a violin and a fiddle the same thing? It's exactly the same thing. They might hold it a little differently. We have our fancy shoulder rests and all of that business, and a lot of fiddle players might not use that. But everything else, it's exactly the same. So
I mean,
how you hold it and all of that.
but like somebody like Charlie Daniels had chops, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I mean, and you look at how they play, and a lot of times it's a collapsed wrist instead of out like this, and they will have a different bow hold, and their bow is probably going to be a lot tighter, wound
okay,
than how we use ours. But even then, I mean, it's not. It depends on who you're looking at, where you go in the country,
yeah.
what decade you're talking about, who they played with, all that kind of stuff, how they learn, you know.
The analog to that is when I hear somebody in that idiom singing, and I love the emotion, I love the song, I love the singing, and all the twang or whatever, whoever it might be. And you're right, the generational difference. I mean, George Strait is just an amazing vocalist. Was, I mean, just unbelievable. But from a classic side, I suppose the analog to this wrist comment would be, I can hear how there's no way in hell that's gonna, that's gonna stay in this octave, and there's no way in hell it's gonna last in that opulence over long, all those measurements that we have in the classical world. But what's really interesting, and you get this on the country western thing, is they have the same preoccupation with resonance and with sound and with believability and with air. Very often, it was so dry I couldn't work, or I just wasn't used to this humidity, I couldn't even operate. Those are the kinds of things that we measure. Is that a big factor for you as a violinist?
Oh yes, oh yeah,
Climate's a big deal, right?
absolutely. I mean that, if the temperature changes overnight or if it goes from really dry to really humid, you don't know what to do with.
When you travel, for instance, when you come to Europe and it's completely different, do you take the fiddle out and set it out so it kind of goes, oh, I'm in Lausanne now, I'm not in South
Well,
Carolina?
it sort of depends on where you're going and what the weather is like, right? Because we use, humidifiers, dampits, those kinds of things. So if we go somewhere where we know that it's going to be more dry, then I'll open the case and I'll make sure that the dampit is in there, and I'll check the humidity level and all of that. And actually, for the violin, I try to keep it closed as much as possible to keep the humidity in the case. And I take it out to play, and then I make sure that I close the case and I don't leave it open so that it can contain some of that humidity in there.
Thank you for answering these questions. I've got one last sort of the 9 questions you've always wanted to ask a major violinist, and I didn't get to them with Gil Shaham, by the way, who you have this wonderful relationship with the Vivaldi, also an old friend. But why does a string break?
Too much pressure. Why do any of us break?
Is it a screw up? Is it
No.
is it like is it like is it like a note that cracks? I mean, the guy goes up for the girl, goes up for the audience. Oh, excuse me. Uh,
I've never thought of that metaphor before, but that kind of works actually. So it depends on where it breaks, right? So most of the time you'll see people or violinists break their E string because it's the thinnest string, it's the
right.
skinniest string, and so usually it breaks right where it touches the bridge.
Ah,
So that's literally
yeah.
from pressure. Um, and also, then, there's a little piece of plastic tubing that you have, a little tiny that you put around the string so that it's between the string and the bridge so that it has a little bit more of that cushion on there. And some bridges have it just built right onto the bridge so you don't have to use that.
Can that tubing slip?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's good.
And I don't.
I'm actually thinking more about I've had it happen several times in an orchestra performance, and bang, something, and the first desk, oops, and the violin gets passed and gets fixed and passed back up, and it's very humorous. I'm not sure I've ever seen a soloist break a string. I actually have, but I don't remember. I can remember him being given the violin, but I think it was a rehearsal because that wasn't in the middle of a performance. Taking the concertmaster's violin. So please, work on. But I don't know. Maybe I'm inventing that.
Well, and
But it is a bit of it's a misjudgment in any case, or can it just happen?
there's different reasons. I mean, you can see if the string is old or if if you've had it on there for too long that it starts to unwind a little
Right.
bit. So it's time to change it then. But if you don't notice, then it snaps.
What I don't mean to do is encourage our public the next time a string breaks that there's a sneer out of the audience. Aha! They screwed up. That's not what I mean. I've always just kind of wondered why that happens. All right, you carry. I mean, how did you? Where's your academia? Where did you go to college and school and university and
So
how?
I left Memphis before I finished high school and was in the Young Arts program at the Cleveland Institute of Music. So I finished my last 2 years of high school starting conservatory life there and doing them simultaneously. So I would do high school in the morning and conservatory in the afternoon. And then from there, I went to New England Conservatory in Boston. And from there, I went to London to Guildhall School with David Takano. And then I went back to Boston, where I met my quartet that I was in for 7, 8 years. The
What do they call?
Excelsa Quartet.
Exactly, Excelsior Quartet.
Yeah, and then we traveled together and lived in Switzerland to study with the Alban Berg Quartet in Lucerne, Switzerland, and Cologne, Germany. So every other weekend we would go to Cologne
And Cologne was the Alban Berg, right?
right, yeah, yeah.
Right. Now, the schools you went to, and were you there because of the teacher at that school?
Um, I think every single time. So the University of Maryland, which is where I got my doctorate, the quartet traveled there together to do the residency.
Okay.
Um, but I think every situation before that, I sought out teachers, and even when I was doing my undergrad at New England Conservatory, I knew that I wanted to end up in Europe and that the way that orchestras played spoke a lot more to me than how American orchestras played.
Tell me about that.
Um, so I grew up in Memphis. I had not seen a lot of, different orchestras, so I didn't know what the variety was and all of that. And then going to CIM straight out of Memphis and seeing Cleveland Orchestra, I was obsessed. I mean, I went to every concert, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I would hear the same concert 3 times in a row, and I would sneak in during intermission if I couldn't figure out how to get tickets. But the way that Cleveland Orchestra moves and breathes, and
Yeah.
there's this, I mean, if you look at a video of them and mute it and watch them, it's like this organic, it's like kelp underwater or something. You can see the whole thing like moving and breathing as one. And a lot of American orchestras, you are actually told not to move too much, not to stick out, and to make sure that you're fitting in, um, and it's actually discouraged to do too much movement and this kind of thing. Um, which is a little bit more on the Boston Symphony kind of thing. So when I moved from Cleveland to Boston, I went to see Boston Symphony, and I kind of felt like I was suffocating sitting there watching them, and felt like I really wanted to be in that kind of environment where people play a little bit more like soloists and bring a little bit more of themselves into this bigger organic melting pot, instead of, fit in sort of like, let's see what it becomes when you have 80 people doing this bigger thing. So, I knew kind of almost as soon as that happened when I moved to Boston that I really wanted to dig into the European side of things. So I figured out all of those summer festivals that fly you over if you get in, that you don't have to pay for them. And I convinced one of them to fly me a month early, and I bought that Eurail pass and lived on the train and just went from country to country to country and took a lot.
That's exactly what I did. When I went over the first time, I had the Eurail pass, and at that time, the diner car on the and this is back before electricity, but in the diner car I had fantastic food, and it was pretty cheap too. And I just went from city to city to city.
Yeah, sounds familiar. Yeah,
I love it. So how did you end up? We were together. You reminded me. Of course, I wouldn't know that. I don't look at I know orchestras from the back of me, other than the rehearsals and so forth. But we were. It was a Verbier tour of the Verbier Orchestra with Ludovic Morlot, and we went right through. I was doing the Kindertotenlied of Mahler, and was the Bolero on that program?
Yep,
No,
exactly.
Oh, was.
Yeah.
And there was something, I don't know what was before.
Don Juan.
No, there was some Haydn, I think, or something before the Mahler. I don't remember. Do you?
I believe Don Juan was on that program.
Who?
Don Juan Strauss.
Ah,
We believe
could
it.
very well be. Could very well be.
Yeah.
But now so we've talked about, schooling, you become a professional, you're going to European festivals, you've got a clear idea. So is the goal somewhere in there that you wanted to be part of an orchestra, or that you wanted to have a solo life, or you wanted to form a quartet, or all three at the same time?
It was always kind of changing and morphing depending on who. And really, I mean, when I was looking for teachers, I was looking for a mentor who was somebody who lived a certain kind of life, like knew how to live that and breathe that music, and outside of just let me teach you a lesson on how to play an instrument. It was history, it was how you use your body, it was how you relate with the music, it was singing it, it was this entire life of music. It was how to live in this world and be a musician, not how to be a violinist. I don't think that was ever the goal. And yeah, there were definite specific, I taught with Malcolm Lowe, the Boston Symphony concertmaster. And when I was doing that, I was very much focused on, okay, I'm going to do this concertmaster thing, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And, when I did the Eurail pass and went around Europe, it was something 40 something lessons that I had planned out, and I was on mid 30s when I was in London, and I took a lesson with David Takano, and I saw how he taught. First of all, it was something like a 4-hour lesson, but he was, running back and forth, grabbing books and pulling open pages and talking to me about the history and having me sing or say different lines. And we were speaking, about Shakespeare and all of this thing. And I knew that I didn't need to get back on that train. I was in for the whole ride. And it's that kind of immersion in the life of music and that obsession with, this is all I want to do. And it really, I do love the violin and I love playing the violin. But it was much more of a bigger picture than just how do I play an instrument? Yeah.
what you're describing and the gleam in your eye is totally reflected in anybody that wants to get to know you on your websites or your projects, and also the very eclectic repertoire that and projects that you have lately been been doing. I must say that it caught my breath when I saw the American Roots project and the very eclectic listing of composers. And the other, not just the women's composer creativity silo in American culture preoccupies me enormously, but also the African American canon of classical music, which I've compared to a parallel universe to what we know as American culture. It's obscene. It's obscene in the sense that it's so unfortunate that people in general don't know what a glorious celebration of Americanism through the eyes and ears and talents of the African American community that we have neglected and have had us as a concert-going public neglected out of ambivalence or even hatred over the last several decades, if not into the centuries. But I'm not going to bang on that too hard tonight. But what we don't hear very much is from the indigenous community, and what's his name that's on the program?
Jared Tate.
Yeah, this is an amazing piece of music. This is, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take you a little screen sharing here. The next thing you see, you'll be in another world. We're going to go here, and this is Laura Colgate's beautiful website, and you can absolutely do all sorts of wonderful things and listen and watch. Will probably, I think that's where I came across. Since I have a nice connection, I can do that. But this is actually you and Sariaho. But we'll talk about her in a minute. But what I did, I pulled up this. No, well, that's your project. You can watch. Where is this? Where did I have it? I thought it was more organized than that. Boulanger, we're going to get to that. I just wanted, oh, maybe it's down here. Now, yeah, here it is, the National Philharmonic, right? And that's that's their website and so forth. But there was actually this wonderful program. I didn't set this up very well, but anyway, you can all see that I have a very. Now we're going to look at that later. We're going to look at that later. We're going to look at that. That's actually what I looked up where the Strathmore is. You can see it's very close to George Washington and Arlington and so forth, but never mind. This is not a travelogue. Why am I not finding this? Am I just an idiot? Yes, please don't answer that question collectively. I can't, I'll get all sorts of emails. No, that's not this. I had it queued up because I was listening to it. I don't understand that. Maybe that was another.
You're talking about the
American Roots program.
Uh-huh.
I was listening. Oh, here it is. It's on your Facebook page. My bad. This is the National Philharmonic Facebook page, and you're actually streaming. It was played on March 28, and it's streaming now until April 3. And I can't, ladies and gentlemen, recommend this enough. I was just listening to it, and it's beautifully filmed and taped and wonderful sound. And the composers, here we are. We have Valerie Coleman. I'm going to be doing a piece of hers at the end of May. Florence Price, we're going to talk about her. Samuel Barber, one of the great idols of American culture. Amy Beach. And here's Jared Tate, who I did not know. And he has, I think, right in here somewhere, he has, you get to meet him. And he talks about his music, which I found absolutely fascinating. Somewhere in there. I'm slipping around. Anyway, is there anything about that project we want to know?
Yeah, I mean, I could go on about American.
Is this part of the Boulanger Initiative? No, this is National Symphony stuff.
So, as the concertmaster of National Philharmonic, I have been curating the chamber music series this year, which has all been streaming. Just this year. But this is the last of those chamber music programs for that series. Most people, if you ask them who the best American composers are, they will say Gershwin and Barber and Bernstein, and I am beside myself that Florence Price, Margaret Bonds, Julia Perry, and Amy Beach aren't the first people who are, and if you know their music, it's a no-brainer. It doesn't even, and not to say that I don't love Barber and Gershwin and Bernstein.
No, that's not the point. That's
Right.
not the point at all. So where did this where when did this light bulb go off? Was it an epiphanal moment, or have you always felt that way?
It built up over time. You know, being a member of an all-female string quartet, we wanted to play more music by women, and we were never given the chance. We didn't have the time. You have to play stuff for competitions, and you aren't allowed to, or rather, when you get put onto somebody's season, they have a say in what you program, and they want things that sell tickets and the names that they know, and nobody knows the names of women composers. And then, of course, going through coursework at the University of Maryland and every other school. I mean, I never was taught anything about women composers and music
That's
history,
right.
theory, and on the stage, playing in orchestras in college and all of that. It just completely absent, 100%. So after years and years with the quartet and never getting the space and the opportunity to do that, I realized the only way I would get to dig in is if I based my thesis on it, if I forced that time into my schedule.
That is a beautiful website. I don't want to burn up so much more time. We go back, but that the well, we can do that actually. Let's go quickly back and show everybody. What I love about this is, I mean, being a website guy myself, the half of humanity has something to say. Now, this is based on a Kayaha, but your thesis is called "Half of Humanity Has Something to Say."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Right.
it.
But what I love about this is quite fun is that, if you, ladies and gentlemen, if you go onto her website, this is on Laura's website, and this is her Half of Humanity, which her thesis and so forth. And it's a beautiful, and if you don't know who Sariaho is, then, please do this. It's some of the most beautiful music written today, an extraordinary composer. But what I love about this is that, a little history lesson. So let's just jump in here. And then what's just so nice, you've got this wonderful conversation that you invite people in, but then you've got actual, maybe that wasn't the right place to go, but you've got examples to hear. Now I've lost myself. Sorry, I'll go back here. A little history lesson if we go back again. Right. You have examples of what we're talking about that people can actually hear the music, right?
Yeah, that's probably
Here,
there. You
exploring the recitals, right? Background of the recitals, phrases here. Anyway, the point is, ladies and gentlemen, besides my incompetence this evening, for instance, you can click on these different things. Some of them are active, and you can listen to different pieces of music. You can get to know different composers, and you can go to their website. I love this kind of. People call it educational. Yeah, okay, it's educational. It's connect the dots. I think our public are far more curious than we give them credit for, and they're certainly far more curious and open than most presenters watching their bottom line actually accept. But I don't mean to bang on presenters, but I think human beings are just more drawn to understanding the world they want to listen to and are listening to than give them the same oatmeal because then they'll pay me another $10 or something. And I think that paradigm is being shaken up right now. I want to hope that that's being shaken up, right? So how do we get from all of these things happening, and you've got your dissertation, you're deep in this work, but the Boulanger project hasn't come to mind.
Yeah, I think there's two things that spurred Boulanger into life. One was an injury that I went through, and I couldn't play for a year. And actually, I didn't know if I would play again. I had to have
Oh
spinal
my God.
surgery. And I actually moved to Hawaii for 6 months to just heal and go through physical therapy, and didn't play a note on the violin. But, I had finished my coursework for my dissertation, and I had not yet. Um, I knew what my topic was going to be. I didn't know if I could play, so I didn't know if I could do a performance dissertation or if it would have to be written. So I started delving into as much literature and music as I could and discover as much as I could and just went down the rabbit hole of women composers. And the further I went, the more I just was compelled. I didn't really have a choice. I had to do something about it. I mean, whether it's because of embarrassment or shame or because, we're just not. And you said we don't give audiences enough credit. We don't give people enough credit. Of course, we want to hear this music. We've been missing out on it for so long and it's so good. And how has this been left out of just our entire world, all of it, education and on the stage and all of this? How can we not do something about this and take it upon ourselves, self-educate and fill that gap? So that, I was already there on that like passion side of things, and then I got back to DC and I met Joy Leilani Garbutt at a coffee house. Actually, I was working on my dissertation and I had my noise canceling headphones on, and a mutual friend came over and tapped me on the shoulder, and I was like, I'm trying to work, can't you tell I'm trying to focus? He was like, no, you have to meet this person, you have to meet this person right
Wow.
now. And I'm so glad that he did, because she ended up being the co-founder.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's a world-class organist. She's absolutely amazing organist. And it started as a conversation between the two of us saying we should probably put on a little concert series for women composers, because she was simultaneously working on a dissertation about women composers at the same time that I was. And, every conversation we had, we added another thing. We have to do something about education. We have to do something about this and that and this. And eventually we just, well, we have to do all of it. Nobody else is doing it. There's tons of these little grassroots organizations and individuals doing their own work, and teachers should not be spending their own time and resources doing this kind of investigation to be able to supplement their teaching. Somebody needs to pull all of these people and these grassroots organizations together into one place so that we can get there faster. So
And your this whole project, this is also fun to, I'm just kind of dumping through the where we are. We're on the Boulanger Initiative website, ladies and gentlemen, and all of these different pages are, I think this is actually Laura Colgate's stuff, and this is a article about these two wonderful ladies and the Boulanger Initiative, and it's a DC series,
so
Washington DC.
we cover the DMV area. So we do Maryland and DC, and we'll do some Virginia events soon as well. But education events, and we have an annual festival that we have not
I
announced
saw
yet.
that. You guys. By the way, this is a Joy Leilani Gabut website with some extraordinary organ playing, and composers I'd never heard of before. I mean, Josephine Boulet. I'm sorry, I'm an ignorant fool. I apologize, but or Jeanne Demessieux. I did not know these ladies. Um, so let's talk about women who compose, which I think is a very elegant and right way to put it. Did you ever come across a woman named Eleanor Remick Warren? She
Um,
was a Yeah, I mean, she was Los Angeles based. Did most of her big composing. She wrote wonderful cantatas, a lot of songs, some orchestral pieces. I'm not sure she did anything with so much chamber music, but She was quite well known in Los Angeles and was part of the Hollywood crowd, as it were. Nelson Eddy was her very good friend, and Lawrence Tibbett and Richard Crooks and all those people sang her songs. She lived to be 92 years old. She wanted to do a collective of her big orchestral cantatas with voice that were mostly based around baritone. So I got called in the 90s and, as you say, stumbled into this amazing rabbit hole. She was an amazing woman, very beautiful and very petite, extremely brilliant, extremely adamant about women's rights and, of course, women as composers. But she gave a slightly curious interview and therefore generated a lot of articles where she was quoted, and she was very happy about this quote: "There is no gender in music." So I listened to a couple of your interviews, and Mr. The famous composer, I'm just blanking. We just looked at his. Yeah, Hans Zimmer. And he was, and there's been a lot of talk about this, the difference that women have and the sensitivities and their perspective and so forth. Do you think it's possible to hear a piece of music and say, oh, that must be a woman composer? Is it possible to hear a piece of music and say, oh, that must be a black, or that must be an Asian, or that must be a gay person?
Tell what somebody's maybe culture and influences were to an
Sure, if
extent,
they use elements, yes, we can suppose, from.
what their training was to an extent, but you can't tell what a person's gender orientation or skin color is. That's absolutely absurd.
But so if we just take that to its logical conclusion, it's just been arbitrary hindrance at the worst, neglect at best, that half of our society who has composers who are women have not been heard, have not been given the right to be heard.
But look at every textbook and look at the name of the authors on those textbooks. Look at the boards of orchestras and what they're made up of. Look at who's on the podium. Look at who's running the organization, and then ask yourself why the women aren't included. It's just, it's the general man's club that has always been, and it's changing. We're starting to see the needle significantly move.
Yeah, and I think I get the impression actually in the last 2 years that needle has moved significantly. I mean, we've been very self-gratuitous over the last 5 or 10 years, saying, "Oh, yes, well, we're giving more people in the repertoire," and it's been the same old, same old. And somehow, in this pandemic, there is and it's disastrous. And I do not want to mince words here. As disastrous it has been to the cultural community and the arts in specific, and the performing arts specifically in America, people, you have no idea how truly destitute thousands and thousands of musicians have become because of this pandemic. And it's an absolutely irresponsible reaction from the government, but our government is structured differently than that, and I don't want to get into that so much right now. But on the other hand, as you say, as those of us who have said, well, okay, let's not lose contact, let's try and pivot. Wonderful word. I think the most important word in entrepreneurial thinking is, it's going to go bad. What's plan B, i.e. pivot? And in that pivot, it feels like what you said before, that we're going to come out of this pivot post-COVID with a completely different demand for repertoire, a different orchestral mission is going to be in orchestras. Are you feeling that from your side of the fence as a leader of two significant orchestras?
Yes, it depends on where you're looking, where you're actually, pointing your attention. And I mean, the needle moved. So you look at the 2013-14 orchestral season. So just to take one example, and it was still less than 2% of orchestral programming went to women composers. And then as soon as the Me Too movement hit, that jumped up to between 7 and 8%. And since then has just kind of been staying right at that level. Now,
What should it
online
be?
programming has completely just boosted that number. Again, you can't compare those things though, right? Once we
Right.
get back on stage, once we see a full season back in person, then we'll actually have comparative numbers. But I think um, until that happens, we're really not going to know what the difference has been. There's a, a good number of organizations who have said that they will change the face of their programming coming back and have done so if they've been online. Um, but the ones who have not said that outright, I'm very curious to see if it sticks, what they've done online, if that sticks on the stage when they get back in person. And we won't know until we see it happen.
You know what frustrates me is it so many of us who know the repertoire and are so passionate about all the wonderful tributaries that give us this wonderful canon. If you and I were given the responsibility to artistically design seasons, wherever they might be, opera house or orchestra or whatever else, we would take people by the hand and say, "Oh, we know that you love the Brahms, and we love Brahms too, but guess what? How about some Amy Beach? That'll work." And in fact, she was severely criticized for sounding like Brahms, and I keep going. And the problem is what? But never mind. She's just one little avenue. But the point is, we keep referring to got to sell tickets.
Right.
And so shouldn't that actually be the development mission foundation, to give a cushion of financial stability that the artistic decisions can be made regardless of the ticket sale?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's two things that I always say. One, look at the age of the average concert goer of an orchestra or an opera, and how do we get younger people in those seats? It is so obvious. You put living composers, you put things that are tangible and that speak to um, that generation. You put
Right.
those things on the program. And the other thing I say, for those people who want to see these things programmed, if you see an orchestra put, an Amy Beach piece on the program, write to them, make sure that this is how we advocate. And if you can donate, even if it's $1, that speaks so many words. But the more people actually speak up and say, this is what we want to be hearing, this is what we want to see, this is what we're going to buy tickets for, that's how we get them to change the programs, because they don't know. They don't know what those numbers are. They don't know who's going to buy the tickets. And of course, we have, the bigger donors who give thousands and thousands of
Sure.
dollars. That probably makes up a huge difference. But if they see the numbers, if they see every single person who appreciates the fact that they heard something that they would not normally hear in the traditional canon, if those voices are heard and if we make that known, that's how we change it.
Well put. I love it. I've got this fantastic list, and I, that of different composers. I don't know if I'm crossing, orchestral as well as song. Have you ever played anything by Marion Bauer? Do you know who that was?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Fantastic
mean,
composer.
by the way,
Well,
she was born in my driver's license is Walla Walla, Washington.
yeah.
That's where my resident my and she was born in Walla Walla, Washington.
Amazing.
I love it. Amy Beach, we talked about. Margaret Bonds, teacher of Ned Rorem, went to Boulanger. Do you know this story? She went to Boulanger like everybody did out of America. Boulanger said, "Sweetheart, I help you find your voice. You have found your voice. Godspeed." And I don't think she meant that cynically. I think she honestly, Margaret just was, she had found her elements that created the sounds of the music she was writing. And of course, she was one of her mentors was the great Florence Price, which we're having a tremendous renaissance for. And this is if you play the Third Symphony of William Grant Still, or you play the violin concerto or the piano concerto or the First Symphony of Florence Price, I'm sorry, you're not going to sit there and say, "Oh, I don't really like that African American music." That's just nonsense.
Yeah.
I like to tell people if they have to get into the arts and humanities, somebody stole them from them in the first place.
Yeah.
This is American culture. These are sounds of us in our soil and these people, and it's wonderful music. But did you ever come across Margaret Ruthven Lang, B.J. Lang's daughter?
No, I don't know that.
Oh, I'm trying to stump you before we get into some of the big names.
I love it.
Let's see if I can. Here's another one. Pull out here. Did Carrie Jacob Bonds write anything for the violin? She must have. But all of her songs you can play on the violin. It sounds the same.
Well, of course, I'd have to look and see. So Boulanger Initiative is creating our own database right now, and we have over 600 composers represented in there so far.
Fantastic.
I think we have 59 countries represented right now, and over 6,000 pieces of repertoire. So,
how many of those have recordings?
So that's one of the biggest purposes of our database, is to find the pieces that have not been published or have not been recorded, and start one by one trying to get those done. But it's
okay. You know what we're going to do? We're going to do, and I know we're a public environment here, but just go with me on this. We're going to create an IDAGIO white label channel for the Boulanger Initiative, and you just keep recording and putting it up here, and it'll live in a streaming world. The way we do this today is just a new world. We don't need the companies. We don't need all the production and so forth. You make it, you load it, you own it, they hear it, everybody goes happy. And your audience is going to your channel because you're there. This is the new world we can work in, and it's also cost efficient, it's marketing efficient. It's a win, 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 and then win. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yep. It's great. I love it.
So, have you played any of Missy Mazzoli's music?
I have. Actually, she performed in our launch festival 2 years ago. Yeah. I'm
a big fan.
Violinist. They were one of our headline performers for the very first festival that we did.
I had her and Royce Vavrick on a show a while back, and then we replayed it last month. And whom I haven't met yet, who I'm crazy about, is Caroline Shaw. Mm-hmm. Her music. I mean, Augusta Reed Thomas. You have Jessie Montgomery, who is just Katia Sariaho, Ellen Tvilich. That was one of the first big woman composers that I went, wow. That was a kind of an epiphanal moment for me 25 years ago. And Joan Tower, the same thing. And I know Jennifer Higdon has actually written me a song cycle, and I adore Jennifer's music. And Laurie Laitman and Libby Larson. These are heavy hitters in the song world. Since this is Song and Beyond, we've got a lot of Beyond and Song. But I keep coming back to this. It's just good music. It's just good stuff. And do you feel that there's a certain patronizing come in when it says, oh, well, we'll have the women composer section or something? I mean, how do we make this music lively? The same thing with the African-American music canon. How do we make this endemic to the American culture without it being pats on the heads and little boutique here and oh, yes, and, it's like you want to play a whole evening of music and then say, who do you think composed that? And just let them be surprised.
Being in the month of March right now, we're in this month where all of a sudden everybody's paying attention to women composers, and yes, we should use this month to celebrate, but it needs to happen constantly all the time. But I really, one of our biggest visions is to make Boulanger Initiative obsolete. We don't want to have to exist. We hate having to say,
I love it.
Composers. Just that phrase. It shouldn't exist. But until we don't have to do it, we still have to do it. We still have to do the advocacy. We still have to do the work. We still have to force feed especially the schools and the education and
well, I really applaud you for starting your initiative, and you even launched and went out there before you actually got your 501c3, and I'm sure you've all that, but you've got database, you've got performances, you've got education. The arts in America are, in my opinion, all about education. It's not just school book stuff. It's not just about Suzuki method education. It's what the Germans call Bildung. It's knowing more tomorrow than what you know today. Building this worldview because of all the various inputs you can have of your own culture. And if there's anything more remarkable, and this is something Hans Zimmer really, I thought, was very, he said, simply writing music from a multicultural standpoint, and I would include gender in that, is a political act.
Yeah.
And this is and the healthy. I mean, I studied political science in school. I mean, it's in the essence of what politics is, the arrangement of people amongst themselves. It is not a zero-sum game. It's an enlightening process. It should be a collective, why don't we do this now kind of atmosphere, rather than I'm going to shoot you dead so I can do what I want to do. And I don't mean to be glib about that, but it's just, it's incredible what you've done with the Boulanger Initiative. Did I show the website? I think I did, didn't I? I want everyone to write down your.
You showed Boulanger's yet.
Here we go. Make sure. Here we go. Boulanger Initiative, and the URL is hiding here, but it's if you just put on Boulanger, and Boulanger. I think everybody really knows who these women are by now. That they're in. I interviewed the Boulanger trio. Nadia Boulanger must have been one of the most extraordinary human beings you can imagine. What did her sister die of so early?
It was Crohn's disease, which they didn't know at the time, so they didn't know how to treat her. But it was Crohn's disease. She died when she was 24, which is just so young, and I think about it all the time, what she would have created if she had lived longer, because, what she managed to do by such an early age, her compositions are just, you talk about breathtaking and goosebumps and all of that. It's just, it's otherworldly what she was able to accomplish by 24. And, when she was on her deathbed, Nadia would sit next to her bed with a pen and the staff notebook, and Lily would tell her what to write in there, and Nadia would write it down for her.
It reminds me of Delius in the same status. Fenby wrote it, but the idea of dictating notation, oh my goodness. But ladies and gentlemen, if you simply type in Boulanger in the IDAGIO, I'm not going to go back on and show you, but in the IDAGIO.com website, or your app if you're an IDAGIO user, which you should be, because it's just a wonderful platform. If you put in Boulanger, you will get several examples of this remarkable music, as well as a lot of the composers, if not all of them, that I've even mentioned here today. Do you know about the Seneca project in Washington, D.C. that Melan Vivier started?
Yes, I sure. Quite a few people have brought this up, actually.
I think Melan would love to meet you. She's one of my oldest friends, or is an old friend, and it's a remarkable project, and it's a free newsletter. So anyone interested in women's rights and women's worlds and the world through women's perspective, Seneca, Seneca, Seneca project with a newsletter is a remarkable source. So why don't we have a ratified equal rights amendment?
Oh.
21. And I sang on a Song of America project I did a year ago. I sang to the Star Spangled Banner text, an ERA text written in 1848.
Wow.
The good news is this is not a Sisyphus project. This is not a rock that you push up and it rolls back over and you keep doing it every day. You guys have moved the dial, and it's really, really exciting. And I hope other like-minded initiatives can band together. We will certainly, in the Hamsong Foundation, since we are in the Hamsong Foundation sphere this evening, we will certainly be giving some kind of spotlight in some way on our website and our resources to what you're building at the Boulanger Initiative. It's very exciting. I don't know which I'm more excited about, that or you personally, to get to know you and your fantastic projects and your beautiful playing.
Well, thank you. It's been so nice to meet you as well and talk to you, despite the fact that we've been on a stage together.
That's it, on tour together.
Yeah.
What was the closing? What's the most remarkable piece of music you've come across in the last 6 months?
It's the last 6 months.
And you can name 5 if you'd like.
That's so hard.
And are they all women?
Digging into that, curating for the American project, I started listening to all of Jared Tate's music, and I highly, highly recommend all of his music.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite new compositions are from Intifigas Visueta, who is a New York-based composer who's actually on Boulanger Initiative's Inclusion Advisory Council.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely stunning compositions. We talk about, Sarajevo. That makes me think about everything that I did for my dissertation, and Gubaidulina. Sofia Gubaidulina is one of my absolute favorite composers. There's so much good music out there right now.
Put that on your Facebook. Everybody go to Boulanger Initiative Facebook page. She's going to list these composers she just had. And if you take those names, cut and paste, go over to idagio.com, I'm pretty sure you're going to find something, some compilation where you'll hear what she's talking about. And we're compiling lists all the time of the next level. I mean, the programmers are always putting new things into the Idagio database. And I can well imagine in the not too distant future that we can be looking at blocks of, i.e. women composers, only just get people initiated. And then we will not do that, because it's about music and not about curiousness, as it were. Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when are you going to play Florence Price's Violin Concerto?
Well, I do believe that National Phil is planning on doing it with Melissa White this coming season. So I don't know if I just announced something that I wasn't supposed to. But we actually did it with Melissa White, the second Violin Concerto, last, before everything shut down.
Do you want to play it would you want to play it yourself?
Oh, I would love to play it myself. Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much music that I want to play. There's so much out there that there's not enough time in the day.
What a perfect end to a wonderfully long interview. I appreciate your time. The ultimate artistic statement of a passionate musician. God bless. Thank you so much, Laura. All the best.
It was great to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
You as well. Good night, everybody. I will see you next week. I'm not going to tell you what we're going to do, but April is a fantastic song month. I promise you, it's going to be really, really exciting. I will see you next Tuesday on Song and Beyond, and some of you I probably will see you on Thursday.